Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Before I go any further, I wanted to give D&D Dice a shout out, my favorite dice shop and where half of my paycheck goes to every month. They've got a lot of options, including their original 11-piece dice sets that they call the King of Crits series. Be sure to use the code LootGoblin to support the channel at dnddice.com, or you can just click the link down in that video description and it'll be added when you check out with your favorite dice. As an edgelord myself, my favorite collections are the Plague Doctor and Blood Hunter 11-piece sets, which I use alongside their Tomb of the Lich dice tower. Anyways, back to the video. Have you ever played in a game where the Dungeon Master thinks that their deep storytelling is being ruined by player agency, so they remove it entirely? Whenever I'm running a game where there are some major plot points that I want to see happen, do I take a cool moment that they skipped over and try to tweak it so it works in a later part of the game? You bet I do, but only if I think that they would enjoy it. Sometimes the party doesn't like a plot point you do, and sometimes it was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You have to respect the player's agency while still having a bit of fun yourself. If you keep hinting at a spooky mega dungeon full of terror and intrigue, and they say it sounds boring, forcing them to do it anyways 3 sessions later won't make it any more enjoyable. Just take some of the coolest encounters and puzzles that were going to be a part of it, and find a way to make it work in environments that do catch their interest. Most players don't mind being guided from time to time, but they will absolutely mind if they aren't allowed to ever take a step off the railroad. Today's treasure was submitted at lootgoblinstories@gmail.com and goes by the name after 10 sessions, we're allowed to make our first decision, and it splits the party into separate games. Content warning for child suicide. It gets a little crazy, man. So my friends and I are new to tabletop role-playing games. We started with the Minds of Phandelver campaign I DM'd about a year ago. The party included Mark, the guy I'm focusing on, and his girlfriend Eve. Mark played a paladin and loved to have an almost childlike response to almost every situation. For example, a shopkeeper denied his crude advances, so he broke some inventory on his way out. He heard a rustle in the woods, so he broke from the group and sprinted straight towards it. So nobody was surprised when they approached a castle full of goblin bandits, and while the rest of the party started discussing a way to sneak in, Mark said, "I'm marching right towards the front door." Eyes were rolled and sighs were had, but they followed. When they finally got to the final boss of the castle, he died in one of the last rounds of combat, but was able to get revived with the lucky scroll placement and a good roll from another player. It was the first time any of the party had really gotten close to dying so far, so it was stressful for sure. Mark was pacing around the room, other players panicking, trying to figure out if they could revive him, but truthfully, I knew that I didn't kill him because Mark was the one who insisted on marching through the front door of an enemy keep. Otherwise, Mark is pretty good. He has an occasional rebellious streak, like sitting out of one fight until the last round. I don't remember why, but otherwise, mostly a good player. Fast forward to our next campaign, he makes a barbarian who is just terribly arrogant and overconfident because he's been coddled and sheltered. I tell him that his paladin already died once from that, and that he's gonna have to work with his team, not against them. He says he understands and that he plans to have an arc where his barbarian eventually becomes a calm and reasonable person. I trust him and we start the game. And it's going well for a while, but we still have the occasional outburst of running straight for things, not waiting for his party to make a plan, and general bullheadedness from him. But this all came to a head in the 6th session, where the party entered this valley with an intense and seemingly permanent blizzard to hunt a troll. After a bit of tracking, a fight ends with most everyone being pretty healthy other than Mark's barbarian, namely because he always refused the rage, since his character was so overly confident. So after the fight, Mark is exactly 2 HP. I remember this because it still comes up. Since most of the party is healthy, they decide to skip camp and head straight for the exit of the valley. On the way out, there's a rustle in the trees. Maybe I was a fool for not seeing this coming, but Mark breaks from the group and sprints right for it. There was some setup to this, a mysterious and large white creature picking off wolves in the distance, so most of the party isn't entirely shocked when the rustling is revealed to be a white dragon, the source of the blizzard. The dragon immediately knocks Mark out, and everyone else is low level enough to understand that this isn't a fight, just a chase. At some point, they pick Mark up, as in physically pick him up, not heal him back to consciousness and begin to book it back to their exit. At some point, someone heals Mark back up in the middle of the chase, and he runs towards the dragon and swings on it. He says it's to protect everyone else because it was getting too close to them and could have dropped them with a breath weapon. But everyone is a little suspicious that he just wants to run towards the dragon and swing. Mark's barbarian dies, the party gets away, and his barbarian's body is gone, meaning no chance of revival this time. Mark takes a long time to make a new character and shares several ideas with me, like a Goliath rogue that's terrible at stealth but always tries it, or a fighter who refuses to wear armor. And I tell him that he's allowed to make those if he wants, but he's gonna die again, so get another backup ready. Eventually, he makes a rogue that's actually pretty reasonable and is still in my campaign today. So it seems like most of this RPG horror story focuses on Mark as the dungeon master, but we get a chance to see how he is as a player. It seems like overall he's just annoying in the in-game sense. He makes dumb decisions all the time, usually because he enjoys his character being like a big dumb idiot. Like a one note or a gimmick character can be funny from time to time. When their gimmick though is that they suck at the thing or refuse to do the thing that their class specializes in, I feel like it gets old super fast. A barbarian that never rages, or a fighter that refuses to use all their weapon and armor proficiencies, and definitely like a rogue that's really bad at being a rogue, is just you playing a commoner with a little more hit points because it's not like you're using any of your class features. I get having a weird character build where sometimes you pull something off that no one expects you to do, but I will never understand a character build where you intentionally opt out of succeeding on something you definitely should. After helping me DM a session in my campaign before he made his new rogue, he says that he wants to start a campaign of his own and have his girlfriend co-DM. I love Dungeons and Dragons, and while I know he's been a bit obtuse as a player before, and he was a little controlling of the players with our co-DM session, I'm excited to be a player for the first time. He's making a World War I themed game with just as much fantasy and magic as the normal D&D setting, but he has some stipulations about our characters. Mainly, he's very specific about which classes we can choose. There are no full casters, no monks, no barbarians, no artificers, as he sees them as overpowered and doesn't want to deal with them in his game. Okay, sure, maybe a new DM doesn't want to be overwhelmed by the litany of abilities from a wizard, or the damage potential of a 2024 monk, understandable. Also, whoever picks the paladin will be the leader of the group. Before the group even meets or establishes a dynamic, we have a de facto leader. I thought it was weird, but I've never heard of a leader of a D&D group in general, so I haven't heard anything bad about it. Maybe it'll be fine. I mean, that is definitely weird, a combination of a bunch of banned classes like that, and then saying one class specifically is like the main character of the story. Sounds like a bad time. The first session starts. I'm a soldier living in an encampment, sent by my general to go around the camp and collect the various members of my new party for a special mission to kill the enemy army's general. I haven't gotten any names for either general or nation, just that the bad guys are the north and we are the south. Our general gives me 5 riddles to find each party member. I guess he knows where they're at, wants me to find them in our base, but wants me to be cute and mysterious about it, so we go around collecting members and eventually find 3 men in a bar. One named Rex is drinking a beer, one is unconscious, and the last one is beating the unconscious one. We ask the 2 conscious ones if they're who we're looking for. They say yes, and the 2 party members join the party, and we continue to find everyone. Oh, so that guy just stops beating the unconscious man and says, yep, that's me, and like walks out of the bar. But we can't find our ranger. I should say the players know it's a ranger, but the characters only know that the last riddle says something like, the last soldier could be anywhere, so we're looking everywhere. A couple hours go by as we're looking in every building and tent in the camp with no luck. Eventually, Mark looks at the time in real life and says, the guards teleport in front of you, pick you up, and begin to carry you to a tent. A couple people try to resist the kidnapping, but we were told that we can't resist and persuading them is useless, so we give up. We're brought to the wizard's tent, and he tells us that we're going to be teleported to the bad guy's spot for an assassination, and to get into the teleportation circle. We all have familiars staying in the camp with us, except for one person because Mark thought it would be funny to leave someone out and they only find out everyone else has a familiar once we start playing, so we asked the guards to get our familiars. They leave to get them, and we're waiting, but the wizard is harassing us to get into the teleportation circle already. We keep saying we will once we get our familiars. The wizard is just saying, don't worry about them, get in, come on, hurry. This argument legitimately goes on for several minutes until we all just relent. As we've been waiting even longer in-game, in-game and the guards haven't returned. The second the last person enters the circle, the guards come in with our familiars. Mark tells us out of game that it's just because his notes say something like, when they enter the circle, their familiars are brought to them, so we had to wait for us to get into the circle. There was no reason for this argument, just the first example of a pattern of rigid adherence to a script. Then we were teleported, but the wizard, old and forgetful, seemed to get confused in the middle of the spell, and were misplaced just outside of the no man's land. There's nothing here in the no man's land but a dog that barks at us. The cleric and I are making jokes about the dog being suspicious, and it may be safer to tranquilize the dog instead of approaching it, but Mark outright says, your character is smart, you wouldn't shoot the dog, and shuts it down. We approach the dog, who brings us to his owner, our ranger, unconscious on the ground. We wake him up, and Mark asks for someone to make a perception check. Our leader rolls low, says, it's nothing, don't worry about it, and Mark says, no, what you get? It's a 3. Well, 3 was what you needed. You see 1,000 skeletons behind you. Eventually, all 1,000 of the skeletons start running at us, and we have literally no choice but to run into no man's land. Rex reveals he's not actually who we were looking for, just some random guy, and the real person we were looking for was unconscious at the bar. The session ends there with the ranger having a couple minutes of playtime all session, and my feelings are mixed. I love D&D. I'm happy to host and hang out with my friends, but also I feel a lack of agency and a little frustrated with some of the details. But I know the first sessions are sometimes rushed and linear to get us on track quickly and get the story into the right direction, so I'm hopeful. Some side notes, Mark says that he had told us before the game started that we had a ranger, and if we had just gone to the ranger trainer tent, there are class trainers like an MMO at the fort we started at, then he would have just told us that the ranger was missing and that we would have saved so much time. I tell him that our characters didn't know anything about the last person being a ranger, so we didn't have any reason to go to the ranger trainer, and he kind of shrugs. We're also almost never using character names. Mark is always referring to us by our player names, so much so that in our most recent session, which is session 10, our leader asked what my character's name was for the first time. Honestly, here it sounds like he's really new to being a DM. It seems like this guy's comfortable wasting everyone's time for hours upon hours if you don't do the exact sequence of things he has written down for his campaign notes. It feels like he's very video game brained here. I know there's like the MMO trainers, but I'm talking more about like the teleportation circle, for example. It's like there's a trigger set up that when you enter the circle, the cutscene happens, and he doesn't allow anything to change until you trigger it in the exact way it needs to be done. I get that when you're a new dungeon master, you're a little more rigid, but after a certain point, you have to realize, kind of like a puzzle, that the party isn't getting it, and you need to give more hints, or you just need to wait for them to say something that's close enough, and you say, you know what, it works. Good job, guys. And you just move along. The author here is willing to ride things out for a little while, so let's see how the next few sessions go. The second session starts. We find a hatch on the floor and start wandering through a dungeon of illusions. In one of the first rooms, everyone is turned to stone except me. While they're petrified, the players can't talk or interact with anything or anyone in the game. A table appears in front of me, along with a deck of cards. I sit down and the dungeon master and I start playing blackjack. After I win 3 rounds, I can touch someone and unpetrify them. Wait, what the hell is going on? We then have to play more blackjack to release the other 4 players. One of us gets unlucky and loses his 3 rounds, causing a special scythe to appear in front of him and cut his head off instantly. No save, no damage rolls, just instant death. The player gives an "oh okay" and then we move on. The scythe greets another player, but 4 of us make it out alive. As we step into the next room, the 2 of us who died are revived with full health, and we continue. In the last room of the dungeon, we meet the general we were sent to kill, only he's here with us in no man's land instead of the north like he's supposed to be. As we walk in, all of us are instantly frozen in time by the big bad guy, and while frozen, we can't interact or talk with anything or anyone in the game. Really, dude, twice in one dungeon? The general unfreezes 1 or 2 people and reveals himself to be a god, and that our general is his brother, also a god, and that the war we're in has been waging for longer than we know. Eventually, we're all unfrozen and allowed to leave. This is genuinely all over the place. It seems like this guy just loves forced cutscenes and unrelated minigames. I'm gonna be completely honest here. I know what he's doing sucks. It's not that bad though. I still would absolutely quit at this point. 2 sessions would be enough for me. A few sessions later, we're searching through an abandoned village and find a 12-year-old girl. She becomes particularly really attached to Rex, but there's no roleplay with her. Mark just tells us what she does, whether or not she's following us, and she never speaks, but that's never acknowledged. Fast forward again, we find another village, but this time it's filled with invisible people who have been living for 1,000 years and worship the evil god we're trying to kill. They corner us in the inn and have us make a decision. We either have to give the villagers a weapon we found in the town that would give us an advantage in the fight against the god, or give them the girl we found earlier so they can use her to repopulate once she's an adult. Okay man, yikes. There are tense arguments across the table about what to do, and it's made very clear to us that these are our only options. After some debating, Mark says out of character that we have to vote, and whichever choice has the majority happens. We vote to keep the weapon, saying that we'll come back and break the girl out so we can have both. Mark turns to Eve, his co-DM, and says, "Do you want to tell them what happens?" We're then told that the girl is taken by the invisible people into the hallway where she grabs something sharp we didn't see her pick up from her pocket and ends her own life. The table is silent other than a couple nervous laughs, and the session just ends. The only acknowledgement between the players about the events is something like, "Yay, how fun." None of us are particularly squeamish, but this came out of nowhere in a joke-heavy game. Yeah, talk about a bit of a tone change there. In the next session, we have a fight with some storm giants that literally apparate around us and begin to charge. No chance to avoid them or talk our way out, it's just a planned fight. We are feeling exhausted the whole time because it's pretty clear, to me at least, that we are vastly outmatched. Rex actually dies in the fight. When he does, the group mostly doesn't react, and Rex lets out a "oh okay" and starts scrolling on his phone. Our cleric has to use his one resurrection item to get Rex back, but we're able to kill the giants. After the session, I decided to look into the challenge rating of the fight to see if my instincts were right, and sure enough, the storm giants we were fighting at level 2 or 3 were double the deadly XP budget for a fight of our party level and size. I couldn't understand why this would have happened, so I reached out to Mark to make sure he understands XP budgets, given that we are all new to tabletop role-playing games. He says yep, that was the intent, and he had some things planned to help us if we needed, but we actually did pretty well, and he doesn't seem concerned about the fact that one of us fully died despite doing nothing wrong in combat. As another note, every combat of this campaign has been a flat, open field with zero objectives other than hit monsters until the number is 0. Because of scheduling issues, we're talking about doing our first Discord session for Mark's campaign, and he mentions that it should be fine to do this session virtually because it's actually just a lot of reading. 8 pages of reading, in fact, and that it should be pretty simple. Absolute dread sits in my heart as I imagine the next session is just sitting still for hours listening to 8 pages of monologuing that I know I won't be able to remember 30 minutes after the session ends because I won't be engaged at all. Mark, however, insists we all show up ready to listen because this is very important stuff and we have to remember it all. So we show up, meet a wizard who takes us into his basement, and yes, it is a couple hours of reading Mark and Eve's NPC backstories as we touch test tubes and those backstories are beamed into our head. Oh god, they're like individual force cutscenes. The 8 pages are written like short stories with highly detailed actions and environment descriptions, and I'm fully checked out by the end. I really tried my hardest to commit those to memory because I want this to be an interesting and fun game, and I don't want to drag it down by being dismissive of narrative, but I could not tell you a single detail from these stories. I doubt any of my fellow players could, and I would even be surprised if Mark or Eve remember much about them now, as they've not come up or impacted the game at all 2 sessions and about 3 months later. The 8-page session ends with us walking into the entrance of the catacombs, where we were greeted with a giant spider. The details of the monster are drip-fed to us, and every time a new detail is mentioned, Mark and Eve both stop and ask Rex's player if he knows what the monster is yet, because Rex's player, not the character, has arachnophobia. So after a few minutes of, "You hear many giant legs tapping on the walls. Do you get it yet, Rex's player?" No. "You see 8 glowing red eyes. Do you get it yet, Rex's player?" No. This goes back and forth for a while. Rex's player gets it, is uncomfortable, and the session ends as we are handed an AI-generated picture of a giant spider in the catacombs. Throughout the campaign, Mark has been using AI-generated images as visual aids, and he also mentions how he uses ChatGPT to generate things like random encounter tables and even stat blocks. space. That right there probably explains why the encounters feel all over the place. They're literally prompt generated. Everything is like slightly off between balance, narrative tones, just cohesion in the story. So I definitely think this is a factor. Honestly though, my main takeaway here is that he printed out a picture of a spider, knowing that Rex's player is afraid of spiders. Giant spiders are totally a staple of fantasy settings, and it's not unexpected to have one there, but if you know the guy that you're playing with has arachnophobia, don't print out a picture of it and hand it to them. It seems like they went out of their way to pick this kind of encounter, just to make Rex's player uncomfortable. There's so many strikes in the story. I mean, you had the little girl just moments before that got introduced really just to be killed off for shock factor, and now they're prying at people's personal fears for more shock value, I guess. This is supposed to be a joke-heavy campaign, but a lot of it does seem to be at the expense of the players. It just doesn't feel worth it to me. Going into the next session, Mark tells us that there will be a decision early on that, if chosen wrong, one character will inevitably die over the course of the next few games. Also, we had to have a friend take over one of our player characters last minute since the player was busy, so that giant spider jumps towards the party and disappears into smoke. It wasn't anything other than a haha, Rex's player doesn't like spiders. But that spider seems to be literate and generous, as it leaves behind a note that states, "Things are not always as they seem in the catacomb." We are allowed exactly one hallway moving forward, so we begin to walk down it when a wall splits the party in two. We are then allowed one door on each side of the party, and some shadowy smoke shenanigans ensues. Then we walk through the next door, and we are reunited. A booming voice comes over the apparent intercom system and tells us, "One of you is fake. Find the fake and be rewarded." Mark then hands each of us a card with either real or fake written on it, and tells us that the fake has all the memories and abilities of the real character, and they are indistinguishable from the rest of us. A few minutes of conversation pass, and a player uses his familiar's ability to enter the spirit realm and receive hints from the dungeon master about how to progress. Mark tells us that he spoke to the person beforehand and made sure they knew they would be the fake, meaning it couldn't have been the player we got to fill in at the last minute. That is our only clue. A few more minutes pass, and a man appears in the room with us, and is essentially just a silent clown. He very obviously and without reason targets the character in the game whose player has a fear of clowns, and essentially just harasses him while the debate is happening. Personally, I know this is BS, and we don't have any way of making the right decision, no matter how much we debate, so we just move on. The next room features a bottomless abyss, and a jumbled bunch of letters on the ground. Mark hands us postcards with 9 letters scrambled, and we try to unscramble them. After what felt like 20 minutes of silence, Mark eventually gives us a hint, and we solve it, revealing part of a bridge and another set of letters. We do this for about 7 or 8 words, the last one being sepulcher, a word that only the cleric can vaguely recall, but can't remember how exactly to spell or pronounce it. So we struggle again, just randomly putting the letters in different orders until we get it. Then Mark says, "Okay, great, now I want someone to say it." So we struggle again, just making noises and sounding out this word we have never heard of until someone stumbles into it. We move on to the next room, and it seems to be a giant mirror until we get close. We aren't seeing reflections, but duplicates of us, and they mimic everything that we do until we try to pass by them, where they do whatever it takes to stop us. They are just as strong as us, and have the exact same abilities as us. So after a few minutes of debating, we decide we have to shoot our way through. We make an attack roll, and so do they. Every single attack. So we just have to keep rolling attacks until we roll better, and tick down their health before they tick down ours. Our cleric isn't happy with this idea, and keeps trying to find other solutions. So eventually Mark just says, "I have it in my notes that the party cannot pass until they defeat themselves." So we realize that once one person defeats their mimic, they will be free to destroy everyone else's without worry. We just aren't rolling well enough, and it takes all of us trying to shoot these guys, but they're always hitting better than us. The last player steps up to try to roll, and is able to get his mimic down first. Another player and I say, "Okay, great, we can just skip forward past him attacking the others, since there's no more risk anymore, right?" Mark ignores us and tells us for an attack roll on the next mimic, and the next one, and the next one. Apparently, all the 5 other mimics need to bleed out as the players roll over and over and over again. 12, that's a miss. 16, hit, roll damage. 8, miss, and it goes on and on and on. A couple of minutes of just rolling over and over pass until the session ends. After the session ends, Mark tells us that there will always be alternate solutions to his puzzles, whether we find them or not. Yeah man, I highly doubt that based on what I've seen. Someone asked about the puzzles we did this session, and he tells us, if you had just tried to cross the abyss without without solving the words, you would have been fine because the bridge was just invisible. So all that time with the words was for nothing, he laughs. And in the room with the mimics, if you just had stood still for 2 minutes, they would have just turned to stone. So that whole fight was for nothing. He laughs again. Rex's player and I turn to one another and joke. Ah yes, we should have just not played the game. Why didn't we think of that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. I have known this whole time that part of the blame is absolutely on me for not having shared my concerns with the Dungeon Master. But all my criticisms are so fast that I can't help but feel like I'd be saying, I've noticed you're being creative and vulnerable sharing the story with us, but nothing you're doing is right or fun. I finally decided after that session that I need to say something. I talked to Mark about my biggest single complaint, that we have no choices. And this all feels more like a novel we're being read rather than a game we're playing. Mark says he understands, and that there have been multiple things he admits he wishes he would have done differently, and will implement more choices into the game. So our next session, which was last night, starts. Mark asks for a perception check from everyone, and one of us notices a door in the otherwise totally empty room. We walk forward and the party is split again. Our paladin leaders led upstairs while we walk into the next room. Believe it or not, the main group of them are frozen in time, and they can't talk or interact with anything or anyone in the game, but the cleric can suddenly telepathically communicate to the paladin leader upstairs. Mark then hands the cleric a few note cards. Essentially, the cleric has to read the paladin a list of riddles, and then the paladin has to solve them and input the correct answers in his room in order for all of us to progress. But the cleric can't really give hints because of how few words he can say. However, the riddles are all mathematical descriptions and the answers are all numbers. Things like, I'm split cleanly by a prime number, but I'm not a prime number myself. Paladin, the only one allowed to solve the puzzles, doesn't know what a prime number is, and is struggling as the entire table is staring and waiting on him. It's just so clear that no one's having fun with any of these puzzles. So the next hour consists of 2 players talking while the other 4 doom scroll or give the table a good 1,000-yard stare. After we get to listen for that first hour of the session, we're allowed to play the game again when the puzzle gets solved. The next room features a teddy bear on the floor. Rex runs up to it and picks it up, and Mark makes fun of him for not inspecting it first. Rex gets hit with a ton of damage, and we roll initiative. While we're rolling, Mark is telling us that he actually prepared so many details about this room if we had just done any checks, such as the fact that the room is soaked in blood, and the teddy bear has a palpable feeling of bloodlust around it. He actually just reads us every word of his notes that we could have noticed if we checked before the fight starts. A player says, "Could we have gotten through this without a fight in any way?" Mark responds with a no. After a slow fight where we hit the monster until the number is 0, we walk into the next room. And believe it or not, we are frozen in time. That's like his favorite thing to do. Where we can't talk or interact with anything or anyone in the game. The evil god greets us again. He gives us a chance to join him or he will kill us. Mark hands us postcards to mark yes or no, while we are told that talking at all is forbidden. I mean, of course, why not, right? In the end, half of us choose yes and half choose no. Rex chooses to join the evil god. The god approaches him and morphs into him, and tells us that all along, Rex has been the evil god. And then he turns to the paladin and says, "I will also give you a chance to reveal yourself now." The paladin says, "Oh, I can do that now?" And says that he is actually one of the characters from the 8-page test tube backstory session. Mark turns to the cleric and says the same. "I will also give you a chance to reveal yourself now." But the cleric declines, even though we all know that he has some kind of secret identity. The game ends there, and Mark tells us that the party is split now. Apparently, the decision to split the party was inspired by my conversation with him a few weeks ago, where I asked for more choices. And he said, "You want more impactful choices? How about one that changes the entire game?" Yeah, but never in a fun way, man. And that's kind of the end for now. I left out a lot of small details, like Mark having a seating chart at the table to make sure players don't get distracted talking to each other, giving disadvantage rolls pretty regularly if a player is distracted, and telling us one more time that we weren't allowed to take a long rest outside of the town without giving any reason. Plus a few more "you have been frozen in time and can't play the game for a while" moments. Stuff like that. I fully take responsibility for a lot of this because I know I haven't communicated my feelings, but that one confrontation had me nearly sweating with anxiety, and I'm working on it. Plus, I don't hate hanging out with my friends at my house for a few hours. Thanks for reading. I know it was a lot. I hope it was more fun to read than to play. I think it's safe to say that that's probably true. I definitely got lost at moments with this story, but it seems like maybe it's because it's a new DM. They're trying a lot of new stuff out. I mean, he's trying all the cliche puzzles that you can try. He's doing like mini games with poker, other random scenarios where you're like jumbling letters to solve a puzzle that apparently doesn't matter. And that's kind of my main takeaway. It seems like a lot of this stuff isn't fun for you guys. Most of this stuff is just like newbie stuff. It isn't the worst thing ever. I mean, is it annoying that everyone either has like a secret identity or serves a dark god no one knows about or is maybe an imposter? I feel like when it comes to having twists at your campaign, it should be done rarely. This guy is pulling twists like every 3 minutes to the point where you're just not taking anything seriously. If there doesn't seem to be like any consistent rules to the campaign and the universe, it is really hard to get invested. Even in the few cases where it seems like you guys are moving and grooving, having fun, suddenly you know that a time stop's about to happen and everything's gonna go grinding to a halt as you guys try to solve another annoying puzzle for over an hour. I think best case scenario, the Dungeon Master is just trying too hard here. Just communicate with the Dungeon Master here. The only thing I can say for sure is this campaign is overly convoluted and the players seem to have like next to no agency. Even the first conversation you had with him where he splits the party doesn't really seem like a meaningful choice you had because it's not even what you suggested. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments below. There are definitely worse RPG horror stories out there. If you liked the video, make sure to like and hype it as it really helps the channel grow, and subscribe to become a member if you haven't already. If you want to submit a story, send it to lootgoblinstories@gmail.com. I really appreciate all the submissions I've been getting lately. If your story is really short, I'm going to try putting some of them in like a compilation style video in the future, so keep an eye out for that. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.